Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 12. It's okay to be not okay. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news and then discussing Discovery Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not.
And then we'll get into our audience question right after our main story. It's okay to be not okay. We're going to be talking about pain and struggle and how we deal with it, and Star Trek 5. Stick around. Did you see how we flipped roles right there?
Yeah.
Like you kept tripping up and I nailed mine.
Well, I tripped up once, but then every time I tried to start, you would like mess up the take by saying something.
No, but you did a couple times because of the Yoda laugh and then the thing and then the other thing. So, yeah.
Oh, well, no, the yodel half was intentional.
I know, but it still tripped up the take.
It tripped up you.
Oh, boy.
This is going to be a pugnacious episode.
Pugnacious?
Tell already. Yeah.
Why is this episode pugnacious?
I don't know.
You don't know what that word means.
Quit arguing. I do too. It means you like to argue.
Okay. How are you doing this week, Tim? How are you doing?
Pugnacious. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good. Glad to hear that.
I'm just now thinking that you could have like a pug dog group that would be like Pugnacious or Pug Nation or something like that. It probably already exists.
Pug Nation.
Pug Nation. It probably already exists.
Yep. There's got to be a band.
There's got to be. Pugnacious. Pugnacious C.
What would it play? Like, would it be ska? Would it be some reggae? I don't know. Bagpipes would have to be involved. Bagpipes. Oh,
I think that would be great.
Yep.
Welcome to everybody. I think we should get into some Star Trek news. What do you think, Tim?
I think that's probably going to be better than continuing to talk about the Pug Nation.
I think so too. So I have some big Star Trek news. I know I played it down like when we were talking before.
Uh-huh.
This is a Star Trek news item that happened briefly after we recorded our last episode, so we didn't get into the episode. Or I would have included it. Doug Jones shaved his head. Does this not impress you?
I mean, okay.
I mean, you know, because he does that whenever he has to wear the Saru makeup because Discovery Season 4 started filming. But
yeah.
That was a thing. Discovery Season 4 started filming. Yay! Like it's old news by now, but we still have to mention it.
Oh goodness! Wow.
But I thought that was a great way to tell you because
how'd that work out for you?
Not entirely as well as it did in my head, but pretty close.
Pretty close. This is why I need the soundboard for the crickets.
Oh boy, but yeah, it was exciting because Doug Jones took to Twitter and like shaved his head, started shaving his head on camera, you know, to say to announce that Discovery Season 4. His hair comes off really easily. I'm sure he's done that a lot of times. So he just went, yeah. So it was pretty cool.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm excited. Discovery Season 4. I don't know. Does this happen? I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but how often does this happen? A series is like 4 episodes in and its next season has already started filming. Like that's crazy.
I bet it's happened more often than we thought, especially with the current, you know, the way things get binged and filmed all at once and whatnot. So
right,
and like the second season, like Loki on Disney Plus, has already been renewed for a second season, and the first season hasn't even aired yet. Oh
wow! See, I don't even know that was a thing. Is that a Marvel thing? I guess. Yeah.
It's an MCU thing.
Wow.
But no, that's cool. My news in comparison is pretty small.
Yeah. Well.
Literally.
To,
quote Chandler Bing. So apparently, Kevin, and yes. this has probably made the rounds on the internet. So all 3 of our fans listening to us right now are probably already aware of this. But scientists have 3D printed a microscopic Voyager, USS Voyager, that moves on its own.
This is the story of a little ship that took a little trip. Come on, Deep Space Nine. The episode where they shrank the Defiant and Worf had his little poem? Come on!
I am drawing a blank. Sorry.
Oh man, that fell flatter than the Doug Jones thing. The people at home will get it. The people at home will get it. The studious Deep Space Nine fans laughed over that bit, so they didn't realize that you completely dropped the ball. So that's cool. So
I dropped the ball. Okay.
Yeah, because you didn't laugh at my joke. That's your job. You're supposed to laugh at
that's my joke. I'm not getting paid enough for that.
You definitely are not. So that's cool. Like I had actually seen this article, and it said something about that it's able to be steered or something. It flies.
I don't know if it's being steered, but it moves under its own power, like sort of a thing. It's not provided any power. That like they've coated it with platinum, and it reacts to the hydrogen peroxide solution that they place it in, and that propels it through the liquid. So they're hoping that by studying these micro swimmers, is what they call them, that they can understand how things move, and it could help them to develop new ways to deliver drugs and, treat diseases and that sort of stuff. The reason this ended, the reason they did a Voyager, 3D printed Voyager, is one of the co-authors of the study was a huge Voyager fan. And the last week they told him he could 3D print whatever he wanted. And so he went with the Voyager.
See, I think the whole thing about delivering medications and studying movement, I think that is just a story. I think that's just what they say so that they can 3D print a Voyager and make it run. I mean, that's because scientists, the best scientists, are all just nerds. So that's good. Awesome.
I'm pretty sure scientists are nerd by like definition.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, but I mean, there's a nerd. There's nerd and there's nerd. I don't know. I don't know. There's the I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I'm just saying, people who delight in nerdy stuff.
Geeks.
Yeah. I don't know. Will Wheaton calls us nerds every week on the Ready Room. So.
Oh, well, all right then. I guess we're nerds.
Yeah. And Alice, anyway.
I can't hear the word nerd without thinking of the film Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the candy.
Oh, that's good too.
I can't eat them. They give me a headache.
Yeah, they're nothing but sugar. But
you know what else is nothing but sugar?
My wife. Because I know she listens to us.
Not bad. Not bad. I was trying to transition into Discovery and say, you know what else is nothing but sugar? This week's episode of Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, I figured that's what you were trying for. Yeah, and so
I figured you figured.
I figured you figured I figured.
I figured, oh boy, we can do that all day. So yeah, Star Trek Discovery, season 3, episode 4, Far From Home. No, not Far From Home. Fear Me Not. Forget Me Not. I can speak.
Woo! We'll fix it in post.
Yeah. So Star Trek Discovery, season 3, episode 4, Forget Me Not. What'd you think?
I really enjoyed it.
Fascinating analysis.
Yep. I know. That's what I'm here for.
That's good.
And that, and apparently to laugh at your jokes.
Yes.
No,
exactly.
it was really good. I enjoyed the deep dive into Trill culture and the exploration of Adira's character. Was pretty cool. I liked that. I liked Michael's part to play in there. I think I liked, as cool as all that stuff was, I think I enjoyed the B plot more. I really enjoyed watching Saru try to heal his crew.
Yeah.
I liked this is clearly going to be the origin of the ship's counselor, right?
Right.
Culper is definitely, it's Culper, right?
Culber.
Okay. And I oh my gosh, after watching The Ready Room, that actor, I love him.
Wilson Cruz is amazing.
Yes, so much. He's amazing.
Big fan.
Yeah. So, I love the attention to the mental health they played in this episode, and I love Saru trying to figure out how to. I feel, well, I don't know. Maybe it's not. I at first I thought it was a little step back for him on his empathy front, but I don't know.
Which part? In what way?
Like when Culber is telling him that physically everyone's okay, but mentally they're not. I figured that would be something he would have picked up on.
Yeah, no, I can get that, but I also think that I mean, look at everybody is stressed out on the ship. Everybody is, right?
Right, including him, he said.
Right. But like we, the viewers, have all really primarily been concerned about Kayla Detmer. Mm-hmm. And thinking, you know, oh, there have been all kinds of fan theories about what's wrong with her. And
okay, like, so can I just say, I am so glad it wasn't control.
Yes.
I love the fact that it's just PTSD.
Yes.
And that ending where she's having a hard time asking for help.
Dude, we're skipping through the whole episode. This is
we are. Sorry.
But you're right. I mean, yes, it's so great. But my point in that is that, I mean, everybody's like putting on a front and doing their job, and so it can be hard to really be aware of that, even within yourself, even for somebody as perceptive as Saru. I think, you know. So I you know, and he's not perfect, and he does. I mean, he has a relationship with Tilly, and I mean, I think he's very perceptive, you know, when it comes to Tilly. But you know, he's still learning his crew. He's still trying to connect, and I really appreciate that about him. And I appreciate the fact that he confides that struggle and doesn't hide it from Hugh. So that's
and he's back asking the ship for advice again.
Right. And the ship is getting interesting. I don't know what's going on with that.
The sentience there from the
sphere data.
Sphere data. Yeah. Did I just say sphere cube?
Yeah, you did sphere cube. I was going to let it go.
But fix that in post.
Nope, I'm leaving that one in.
Dang it.
Hey, it's your style.
That's fair.
This episode did a lot of things for me. A ton of things. It was one of those ones, and I guess most episodes are feeling this way with Discovery, that I just wanted to go back through, because there's just so much. It's so rich. There's so many things going on, and I did. I mean, I thought Blue's performance was just so great, and I really dialed in on them when they when I read their interview, you know, because there was just such this youthful energy, you know, and I was like, I want to see what this person's like on screen, you know, and yeah, that was exciting to watch their range and to be really engaged and invested in this character. So you know, so right away, and it was interesting to me because you talk about the A story and the B story, and it's interesting because the B story of the episode has kind of become the A story of our episode. we both dialed in on that side of it. But at the same time, I felt like this was a great, and we used to see this in like TNG and stuff. This was a great interweaving of the two plots, because there's a very similar thread that's going on in them. When Adira goes down into the pool and is joined by Michael, she's scared and she's freaked out by all these, you know, these tentacles that are trying to join with her and everything. And when she starts having memories of Gray during that, and the closer she gets to Gray's death, to that tragedy, the more she's like, nope, I don't want to do this. Get me out of here. We got to stop, you know? And Michael's like, no, you really need to push through. You really need to see this. And I feel like that, that theme of like a confrontation with struggle, a confrontation with pain, that, you know, when we say it's okay to be not okay, when we say that, that the thing that releases the crew at the end of the episode is that admission that things aren't all right with us. And Adira is going through the same sort of thing, where she has to sort of embrace the struggle, if you will, in order to move forward, in order to grow. So I felt like there was a great deal of harmony between the two storylines. Wilson Cruz, in the Ready Room episode for this episode, which I commend people to watch. He and Anthony Rapp were on it, and he said, when we put the most marginalized people in our society at the center of our stories, and we shed a light on them, we free millions of people to feel and own their own stories. And I think we're looking at a Star Trek that is doing that. There's a song by Billy Crockett called "Last in Line," and it's talking about Jesus' words that the first shall be last and the last shall be first, right? Mm-hmm. And he's talking about, the last in line never get an even break. They're never picked for the baseball team and all that sort of stuff. Nobody wants to be the last in line. And then he says, crazy old man with a long gray beard, shouting out chapter and verse, take the last in line, and put him first. And I think there's a great power. In fact, Wilson talked about a documentary that he made on the power of visibility. I think there's a great power in being seen and being heard that can help us humanize one another. And that's going on in this episode in that other story that we chose as our main topic. Mm-hmm. Because another group of people who are marginalized are people who are struggling with mental illness, mm-hmm. people who are struggling with trauma and suffering, and our trauma and suffering itself is marginalized. And so many people experience it, and so many people suffer with it, and we all suffer, and we all have pain in one way or another. And the more we can share that publicly, the more we can talk about that where other people can hear, it can be amazingly empowering for people. You just can't love your neighbor if you're not willing to listen to their story.
That's my biggest concern. Like, there was a time when I was proud to say that I was colorblind. Right. And now we know that it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
You can't be colorblind. So I don't know what I don't know. Right.
Right. And I just really want to express to people that it's a Christian thing. It's a Christ-like thing to experience people's stories. I don't know. I just think of somebody like Zacchaeus,
right,
who might have been seeking the sort of cultural cachet he had, or the wealth that he could have as a tax collector, because he was kind of smallish, uh-huh. and maybe did feel a little outcast in his society and was kind of, fronting.
Right.
And Jesus humanized him. Jesus came to him and said, hey, mm-hmm. let's have dinner. I mean, right. Invited himself over, which on the one hand is a little bit rude, but, but at the same time, is like, it humanized him. And we can all change each other's lives by listening to each other's stories. And that's really the only way you can. Paul encourages us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And I think one of the best ways to renew our minds is to learn about people who are different from us. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's just a hyper spiritual, thing that happens in prayer or whatever. Yes, it does, of course. And that's part of it. But there's a very real, wheels on the ground kind of way in which that plays out. Mm-hmm. And I think Star Trek is doing such a great job right now of putting that before us
Agreed.
By making these characters who are so emotionally available. I mean, have you noticed this, that Star Trek has always been emotional? Star Trek has always had that element, but so many people in Star Trek, there's a certain guardedness with how they express their emotions. And maybe because we tend to see them in that official Starfleet capacity, mm-hmm. but Discovery is going out of its way, I think, to make them, and Deep Space Nine moved in this direction too, mm-hmm. but going out of its way to make them vulnerable and real and immediate with their emotions. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, we go on and on about Tilly, but she's just the perfect example of this. She is.
Why would you not go on and on about Tilly? She's wonderful.
Yeah, but she's out there, and everybody's emotions are on display, and I love it.
Yeah, it's so much more relatable.
Even Giorgio.
Yeah.
Even Giorgio.
She's playing coy, but we can see something's going on.
We didn't get to talk about it. I think it was last episode.
Yeah.
Last episode was the one where Michael has a reunion with everybody. There's the scene where Michael beams onto the ship and everybody's giving her hugs and everything. Mm-hmm. And then Giorgio kind of walks up in the front from the back of the room there, and they make eye contact, and Michael gives her just a little nod, like, I know you don't want to come up here and hug, so I'm just going to give you this. Yeah. And Giorgio doesn't roll her eyes even. She's like, yeah, okay, that's all I needed to know. And then she turns and walks off.
Yeah.
It's there's still that emotion there. It's beautiful.
It really is. And I think that plays in so much to this episode. You know, I mean, everybody has been worried about Detmer for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's great. I think it's great. Also, the way that Culber is falling into that counselor role, that he's offering mental and emotional health care as well as just physical health care, and the recognition that all those things are connected, mm-hmm. that they're not separate. And you know, we've talked a lot on the show about therapy, and we've talked a lot about mental health. It's just, I don't know why, maybe because that's just part of our lives. It's important to us. But we've just always kind of ended up coming to that. And I just want to be very clear that I think there's a separation for a lot of people in Christian culture, such that psychology or therapy or anything in that mental health profession is really frowned upon by a lot of Christians, unless mm-hmm. you're going to someone who's going to, you know, pull out the Bible and, you know, every time they, which is fine if they do, but
I think there's this fear that because it's science-based, mm-hmm. they're going to try and tell you that your mental health issues are because you believe in this quote unquote fairy tale.
Possibly.
I think there's a large part of fear there that they won't coincide. And like several times my therapist has said to me, it's not my job to tell you what to believe. I don't mm-hmm. want to change your beliefs. Mm-hmm. We're just here to help you heal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important. And you can always, that's a good way to judge a therapist and whether or not that therapist is right for you. Is whether that relationship has space for that, or maybe mm-hmm. they share your faith, you know, whatever it is. But the other side of that is I do think there's this separation between the different parts of the human person. And the idea mm-hmm. is that, and, you know, in some circles, it's like, you don't need to go to see the doctor, or you don't need to take medicine or whatever.
Right. You just need to pray hard enough. Yeah.
And they do the same thing with mental health, where it's just like, well, it's not about psychology, it's about your soul. And so you mm-hmm. need to pray and go to church and seek deliverance and that sort of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with those things. Right.
Right.
But mental health care is soul care. Right. And physical health care is soul care. And some of that is just as much as just as simple as getting rest, which, by the way, is what the Sabbath is about.
Yeah.
That's soul care too, and it's all connected. And so the idea that Culber is filling that role in such an inclusive way, in such a holistic way, I think is a really cool thing to see.
Agreed.
Yeah. And he comes to the fore in this episode so strongly.
He does. Yeah. Oh. This character's journey is turning out to be really interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And oh gosh, what was he like? He was relating to someone, and I can't remember now who, because, you know, I think it was Burnham. He was talking mm-hmm. to Burnham, and she had said something. He was like, "Yeah, I know what that's like."
Yeah, yeah. Well, and he said in that opening narration, he says, "I've been alone, I've been lost. Mm-hmm. Both are survivable, and survival can become living again." And I love that. And the whole idea of saying, you know, we're not okay, and that being a release that we need, you know, mm-hmm. that we haven't even talked about the the meal, the family meal around Saru's table. I mean, good night. How difficult was that? And how much did Saru feel like he failed, at the end of that? And yet what happened was what needed to happen. That family conflict sort of needed to take place so that people would start confronting the fact that things are not okay and that they're not okay, and they can start to do the work of healing. I think I mentioned it last episode. Fred Rogers loved to quote his mentor, who said, anything mentionable is manageable.
Yeah.
And once we can talk about it and admit it, then we can start to deal with it. And that's what Kayla has to do at the end of the episode.
On a lighter note, I think Giorgio and what's his name, the alien with the big eyes.
Oh yeah,
I think they're becoming friends. I like just the little bits that we get to see there, where she's like watching him eat with fascination, and he hands her the box of popcorn at the film. I love those little moments between those two. I'm enjoying that. That's
pretty great. And that's the thing about this crew too. There are so many people. Like on Star Trek, usually we have like our core 7.
Right.
And on this show, I don't know how many people we've got, because
I was surprised to see how many were around the table. Like, wow.
There's so many people just on the bridge. We've got so many, and in previous incarnations of Star Trek, like those people would come and go.
Right.
Sometimes they'd be there, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes, it could be a random person who won a contest walking through the scene, or it could be a day player or whatever it is, right? Yeah. And that would be a cool, fun thing for, a cool, fun gig for somebody to get. Oh, I was on Star Trek. I held a clipboard, whatever.
Right.
A clipboard, but whatever, a pad. And, and so, I feel like and this is something that I think that carried over from the Kelvin Timeline films too, is just that there are more people on the bridge and their contributions are more important. But at the same time, we still have names to learn in season 3.
Yeah. Right.
So
I'm just now learning Detmer's.
Yeah. Like Detmer's Kayla. Name. Yeah. Well, I only know Kayla. I only know her first name because I've looked her up a few times. Right. So I mean, is that a problem in the writing? I don't know. Is that?
I mean, you can't introduce too many characters at once.
That's true.
So you kind of got to start with the central, and then as you get comfortable with them, you need to expand out.
Yeah. And they're doing that.
They are doing that. I think they're doing that well. There are some people that have complained that, like you said, we don't know their names for however long. We don't really know them. And they're saying that Discovery is bad because of that. And I feel like they just needed some time to start growing the circle.
Well, and the other thing is, they could have a point, but you can have a legitimate gripe about a series without writing it off.
True.
I mean, come on.
That's fair.
I think there are decisions that they made in this series. I think there are decisions they made in Picard and other things that I don't particularly like, or think work, or I think maybe were mistakes. And they've moved away from some of those things as time has gone on, and in response to fan reaction and things like that. And that's cool, but Star Trek has always had flaws. So
sure, that's fair.
We
look through the past and through the rosy glasses of nostalgia.
Yeah. And speaking of Star Trek having flaws.
Oh no! You can't segue that way into my favorite film.
I didn't even know I was doing it, and now it's like, this is perfect. Star Trek 5. Speaking of Star Trek having flaws, if we've covered that episode well enough, you think? Do we skip over anything?
We didn't really give much. We didn't really talk much about the caves.
This is just because you don't want to segue the way I segued. But yeah, you're right. What did you think of that?
We've only got like 3.5 minutes left, but
that's okay.
I loved the caves. I loved the practical effects. Learning about that through the ready room, that was really cool to watch. Awesome. I really loved how supportive Burnham was in all of that. And yeah, I was drawn in by Del Barrio's performance.
Yes,
I thought
too.
they did well with the experiencing all of that.
I was predisposed to like them because
Sure.
Just like I've said, I think I've said before that the first time I heard that name, Blue Del Barrio, I was like, that's one of the coolest names I've ever heard in my life, and I'll remember it forever. It's like the first time I heard Lynn Park, I was just like, oh, that's the coolest name. Just certain names just grab me. Connor Trenier, oh my gosh, is there a cooler name in the world than Connor Trenier? Anyway, I know they're all Star Trek examples, but everything's a Star Trek example in my life.
Sure. Or Mr. Rogers.
Or Mr. Cornflake especially. And all the Rogers fans went, oh yay. So I'm predisposed, and I read that early interview and I found them to be completely charming, and so I've just been excited, to see this person ever since. And poor Ian, I don't know anything about him, so when he shows up, just like, not warming up to you yet. It's just terrible. But anyway, I love that. Okay, from a writing standpoint, I did wonder, like, does it really make sense? Again, this is kind of like that Burnham centric thing about the show, which they're really playing against at this point. But still, like, does it make sense to send Michael into the pool? Wouldn't it make more sense for one of the Trill leaders to go into the pool?
That was my initial thought, but I feel like Adira had a stronger connection with Michael.
Yes.
And was able to respond to her encouragement more than they would have a random Trill.
Right. And I mean, is anybody, who among the Trill, I mean, except that one guy, but who among the Trill is on her side? Right. And then, like, there's I don't know, maybe because Michael's human, all of that, I don't know. It just seemed a little odd to me, but it still worked. And although it still worked, and I think the scene played out beautifully, and I think the way Michael encouraged her was as someone who has had to confront her own pain. And and this is the other thing. There's a whole aspect to this because the Trill are such a religious people. And this whole concept of Adira showing up, and they're so excited until they find out she's human.
Right.
And this sense that, like, okay, but you are an outsider. You can't be one of us. If you think about, the symbionts are kind of almost like they're gods, right? It's like, you can't possibly be accepted by our gods because you're one of those people. So you go back and you hear a Jew saying that to a Samaritan or to a Gentile. You go back and you hear a Catholic saying that to a Protestant. But so often, like even with Jesus, when people saying, nothing good can come out of Nazareth, and it's like, it just seems like, in the scriptures, there's this constant story of the family of God getting bigger and the outsider being let in. When Jesus uses the Samaritan to teach the Jew how to be a neighbor.
Right.
His fellow Jew, I should say. I don't want to other Jesus from Jews.
Right.
But then also, like when in Paul's time, that acceptance, and even Jesus starting to accept Gentiles, and then Paul carrying that further, and Nadia Bolz-Weber, I'm gonna paraphrase her, but she said it really well. She's like, we like to really calculate and proclaim who's in God's tent and who's out. But we forget that it's God's tent.
Yeah.
And God will extend God's tent over whomever God wishes, and it ain't up to us.
Right.
And that really came through to me in this episode. I think it's a very clear sort of metaphor or mirroring of that story that I think is a story that Christians should understand very deeply, because the reason we are Christians is because God's tent was extended over the Gentiles,
right?
By Christ and by Paul, and by that early movement. And so, we above all people, not above all people, but we, of all people, like you would think that because of our cultural story, with which we tend to be disconnected, so there you go, we would be understanding that God is about taking those who are outside and bringing them in, putting the spotlight on them, as Wilson Cruz says, bringing them to the center of the narrative, taking the stone that the builders have rejected, come on now, and making it the cornerstone, right? This is how God works. This is how God moves in this world. God takes that which is discarded. God takes the things that are not and causes them to be the things that are. See? So, I mean, that the last in line, man. That's how it moves. That's how the story of God and the unfolding of God's love in our world and our universe, that's how it moves. And every time we take a step toward inviting somebody else to the table, right, the closer we get to that table that we all share with Jesus at the end of all things, where as Jesus says in my favorite film, Last Temptation of Christ, what do you think heaven's like, right? God's the bridegroom, man's spirit's the bride. The wedding takes place in heaven, and everyone's invited. I think that's solid.
Can I get an amen?
Yeah, you got me preaching, sir. Oh, sorry. You got me preaching, sir. Yeah. Star Trek got me preaching. That's not uncommon.
That's right. True that. So speaking of preaching and relieving pain
and bringing in the outcast from the cold, right?
Exactly.
Star Trek V, the outcast Star Trek film.
Yes. Oh,
it is.
That's fair.
It is an outcast Star Trek film. I was talking.
It's got like a 21% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I know. Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine, and they didn't see that film until they were an adult, and they'd grown up on the other 5 movies, but everybody said that it wasn't awful, so their family just skipped it.
Oh, wow.
Then they saw it as an adult, and they're like, I love this movie. What's wrong with it?
Right? I don't know why. I think the first time I saw it would have been junior high or high school. Yeah. I might have seen it in the theaters. I can't remember for sure. I was young enough that
I know I didn't. And it might have been you that I was with at the theater. See if this rings a bell for you. Sitting in the lobby on the floor, like waiting for my parents to come and pick us up. And there was a big standee for Star Trek V. And we said something about, gosh, why do they keep cranking those movies out?
That does not sound familiar.
That was not you? Okay.
That was not me. No,
all right.
No.
But anyway, yeah, so I know I didn't go see it, but then like a couple years later, I was happy to have it on VHS and watch it.
Right. So. and I don't know, I can't exactly put my finger on it. I really enjoy the film. It's a lot of fun for me. From the Klingons to the little bit of campiness, some of the overacting. I mean, we definitely get a Groppler Zorn moment there.
Which one?
And I just, I
That's
love
a callback to the audio commentary days for those of you who weren't with us.
But yeah, there's a lot to like, and we've talked about this. There is some. You can pull some wisdom from the film.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had a really decent chapter. On the film,
I enjoyed it.
I only focused on one scene, but part of that was the word count for the book was what it was. Sure. I had that written, and I was like, yeah, if I go any further, I'm going to have to write this whole length of words again, and I don't have space for it. But there's a lot to unpack and a lot to talk about that film. Talk about in that film. But the reason we wanted to bring it in for this episode was, or at least for me, was its kind of confusing relationship with pain, and its confusing relationship with that idea of admitting that we are not okay.
Right.
At least it's confusing for me. I was like, I see Sybok in Star Trek V as the nexus of Star Trek V, as in nexus from Generations.
Right.
Where it's this concept, it's the linchpin of the plot, and it functions, but it honestly doesn't make any sense. And the more times it's explained, the less sense it makes.
Sure.
Right. And in that film, it was because Brandon and Ron needed it to serve a purpose, and they really didn't have time to figure it out before they had to get the film written. So as they had a deadline and they had strict rules for how this film, what this film was to contain and not contain, and they had to work around it. In Star Trek V, I don't know what the excuse is, but I don't know. How do you perceive?
Who wrote Star Trek V? I'm trying to. Yeah.
Gosh, I should know that.
You should.
I want to say that Harv Bennett and maybe Bill Shatner might have co-written it, because I know he directed it.
Let's consult my alpha memory.
Yeah, check your alpha male memory while you're doing that.
Screenplay.
Good.
Screenplay by David Lowery.
Oh, okay.
Story by William Shatner and Harv Bennett and David Lowery.
Okay, yeah. So yeah,
by Harv Bennett.
It is the two of them, but David Lowery writing the script. Yeah, right. Okay, I don't know what hand each of them had in the story, but my central problem with Star Trek V is Sybok. As much as I love Lawrence Luckinbill and think he gave an amazing performance and couldn't have done better, I'm so glad it wasn't Sean Connery. Did you know that? That's who they wanted for the role.
I did not.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So they wanted Sean Connery to play Sybok, but they couldn't get him. So they got Lawrence Luckinbill, who was perfect. I think Connery would have been a mistake. But the planet that he's on, that the God thing is on, Shakari.
Yeah.
Sean Connery. Shakari. That's where that came from.
That's funny.
Yeah. And God bless Sean Connery, who died just a few days ago.
Right.
So, yeah. So I don't know. To me, where were we going? Oh,
you were talking about your central complaint.
Yeah. My central complaint about this, the story, at least, is Sybok and the God thing character, and how their relationship isn't clear, and Sybok's character isn't clear. I think Lawrence's performance grounds that character, no matter how weird the dialogue is, and we get a sense of Sybok's journey much more because of that performance. But I don't understand. I didn't like the sibling retcon. So I had major flashbacks when in Discovery. I didn't like the sibling retcon, and I just didn't understand the character, because what is Sybok's thing that he does? What's your perception of it?
So I feel like he does something, Vulcan mind meldy to, my understanding is that he removes your pain, and that this sort of acts as a anesthetic that allows you a certain sense of, like when you get an actual anesthetic and you just kind of like, yeah, everything's cool, everything's fine. And there's this sense of, if only we could get rid of our pain, everything would be okay. And that's the mistake. Now, like the way Kirk goes about arguing against that, the way he so vehemently cries, I need my pain. I think that gives the pain too much credit. I think the takeaway there is that that dulling the pain is not the solution. You have to face it and confront it and figure out what it is in order to defang it and live with it, because you can't get rid of it. What has happened to you has happened. It is painful. It's happened. There's no changing that. So you've got to deal with it. And the anesthetic is not dealing with it.
Yeah, I was watching a TED Talk recently that I'd seen years past, but a friend of mine sent to me, from Hannah Gadsby, and she quoted her grandmother, who said, "The soup's made. You can't take the onions out." Basically, that's the short version. But yeah, exactly right. That it makes us who we are, and Kirk's right about that in a certain sense. I need my pain. We do need it, but we don't need it in the sense that he has it, where he just sort of broods with it in the corner and isn't working through it, right? And for me, it's like, and so there's something that seems healing about what Sybok does, particularly when he's working with the big three, and they're all we get to see what they see,
Right. Yeah.
And there's that really great scene. I mean, Dee gives just the most beautiful performance of portraying McCoy's father's death.
Yeah, that is a very moving scene.
That's one of those. Yeah, go ahead.
You can feel McCoy's pain, and you can understand. It does give you a lot of information as to why his character is the way he is.
And that's great. And I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of hidden in that movie that is like worth the price of admission, or worth the cost of watching the parts that aren't so good. Which is why 5 is not my least favorite Star Trek film. It's maybe third or fourth from the bottom.
That's fair.
But it's but you have those moments, and you have those things, and but what does that do? What happens in that moment? I'm just from a writing standpoint, I'm just griping about the movie. What happens in that moment when it's like they confront this painful episode, and then Sybok takes it from them, they experience it, and then he takes it from them, and then they suddenly will follow him anywhere?
Yeah.
Like the whole crew is behaving completely out of character, and but Sybok insists that he doesn't control minds, and I'm like, it kind of seems like you do, but then what snaps people out of it? Because there doesn't seem to be anything but somebody deciding, oh yeah, you're right, I do need to pay attention to reality and take care of my friends, therefore forget about you, Sybok. It's just like I that is the part that's so confusingly written, and I wonder if it keeps the film from saying something strongly, I guess, or carefully about how we deal with pain. I think you've pulled out a great way to view it, though.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They could have gone deeper with that. I think there's an element of addiction they could have addressed. I kind of see it as they're following their pill pusher. They're like, this guy has taken it away from me, taken this pain away from me. In case it comes back, I'm going to stick with him so he can take it away from me again. As opposed to finally getting to a point where you're like, no, this is not healthy. I need to address my pain, not bury it.
The inverse of Data's relationship to Lore in Descent Parts 1 and 2, when Lore uses emotions like a drug to lure Data into his plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Grass is always greener, right? We want what we can't have.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's possible. But rather than dwell in the weaknesses of the film, I did want to go into that, because the whole idea that it's okay to be not okay. Oh, let me do this.
Oh,
it's okay. Oh yeah. It's okay to not be okay. No. Wait, that's wrong.
Said it wrong.
It's okay to be not okay. See?
There you go.
Doesn't that sound good coming from the George Takei voice?
Right, it does.
Good. So yeah, those of you who didn't notice, Tim worked a little George Takei reference into our title this week. I think you did that on purpose, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, because most people would say it's okay to not be okay, but I like the way that's phrased, because it's being as not okay as a package deal, right? As a nounal phrase. I mean, adjectival phrase.
There's a difference between not being okay and being not okay.
Not okay, like saying I am in a definite state of not okayness.
Right.
And and then and saying that's okay.
Right.
It is, and it's something you have to go through. And I don't know if I've talked about it on the show or not, but I mean, this has been a year after I got over the intense anxiety of the beginnings of the pandemic, which took a couple of months. After I got kind of through that and started my caregiving job, which is taking up a lot of my time and giving me a focus, and doing the podcast. But once I started getting into that part of my life, I had an incredible sense of being okay. I've had an incredible sense that for the first time in I don't know how long, months, years, I don't know, I could go through my life and just say, I'm not depressed. Like, I'm honestly not depressed. Wow. Like, even though some of the same circumstances about which I was depressed a year ago are still extant in my life, I'm not depressed about them. I can deal with them. I can handle them. And I've been just fascinated by this idea for months. And then just this weekend, I was not okay. I mean, it's weird that we were talking about being not okay. And just this weekend, a lot of things kind of came at me at once. And I was not okay this weekend. I was not okay earlier today, but I did something that I think is important. We record on a Sunday, and I ended up having a Sabbath because I engaged in some soul care. I took some rest today. I rested and I renewed myself. I restored myself, and I got with friends who I knew I could trust. And just, and people who would just sit with me, and let me just express where I was. And that was huge. That was huge because it was, I mean, a lot of that sense that I've been all right has made it feel like maybe it's a failure if I'm not all right. Right. But it's not a failure. It's just part of being human. It's something we all go through, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to deal with it, or we're going to be even more not okay. Yeah. And so I don't know entirely how that relates to Star Trek V. but just to say that when I am in those darker places, I am sort of doing what Kirk did in that movie. I am sort of just holding on to that little nugget. I can kind of just picture crouching over it, like my precious, and I could do my Gollum impression, but I'm not going to, unless you ask me. But yeah, just being like, just keeping it in, and just brooding over it, and holding on to it, and being weighed down by it. You can't work through something and make it go poof. That's not how it works. But what you do is you work through something and you figure out how it fits into the cobblestone of your being and into the mosaic of your life. And that's how you move forward. And Sybok realizes he's wrong at the end of the film, right? Right. He realizes he's been a fool. He thinks that somebody asked me, is Sybok malicious? And I'm like, no, I don't think he is. I think he believes in what he's doing. He's just misguided, right? And he has a power of some kind of gift, but he doesn't know where to direct it. And he's following a false God. And that's the whole point of the movie, is not that there is no God, but that God is not like this.
Right.
And that God image reflects so many people's image of God, and when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are tearing him down, and saying, Spock says, this is not the God of Shakari or any other God, that's so important to say. And then of course, at the end of the film saying, well, maybe God isn't out there. Maybe he's right here in the human heart. Yeah, God is right here in the human heart. We are the reflection of God. We are the imago Dei, the image of God, as broken and as fractured, as marred as that is. We are the image of God, and so yeah, there's definitely a truth to that.
I mean, what's not to like about Uhura's line, "I've always wanted to play for a captive audience"?
Oh, everything. That whole scene is terrible. The guys are crawling up the hill, and one of them literally says, "Woman." I'm like, oh my gosh. This is so bad. Oh gosh. It's terrible. Terrible. The Uhura fan dance is a low point in Uhura's story. So the one thing I did want to get to also before we get out of Star Trek V is, and the way it mirrors the Discovery episode this week as well, in that admission that we're not okay, that relates very much to a Christian practice, which our Catholic friends understand more than a lot of our Protestant friends, which is confession. And I think even though Catholics understand it ritualistically, I feel like the meaning gets lost sometimes, and the best priests recall it to our minds. But the importance of confession is not just and absolution too. I think confession and absolution help us admit things to ourselves and also forgive ourselves. As a Protestant, I really don't believe that I can, say a certain number of prayers or whatever, and have a priest tell me my sins are absolved. I don't respond to that. But I understand where it's going. Same thing with penance. I think if you want to see the value of penance, watch the film The Mission. That was the first time as a Protestant that I really got penance. It's not that I have to pay God for my sins. It's that I have to work through them for myself. I need to do something visceral to help me process my own guilt. And I think those kinds of things that are in Christian tradition are often sort of, if they're used right, they may not be theologically necessary, at least in my view, but they can be psychologically, emotionally, and therefore spiritually necessary for us to work through the truth of our relationship with God, which is that God is not surprised by our faults or angry about our shortcomings, but just, well, like I mentioned, that song "Always Waiting There for Me," just waiting there for us to re-embrace, and can take our anger and can take our problems, our difficulties. So anyway, I didn't want to talk about that there is a good thing there, and there is a very Christian thing there, and I think that you get that a little bit in Star Trek V, that importance of confession. But I don't know that it's confession done in the right way, but I think it's in there. And I think that's why it's not only okay to be not okay, but to admit that we're not okay. And just as a button to that, if I may, do you,
sure,
before I steamroll anything that you might be willing to say.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Just as kind of a button to that, I did mention just a second ago, Madison Cunningham. I recommended one of her songs a couple of episodes ago. This episode, I want to recommend a song that is really one of my favorites, and that when I have been struggling, like let's say this time a year ago, I have clung to for dear life. And it's a song called Secret for the Mad. And there's actually a book by the same person. Dodie is the artist. And when I heard Madison Cunningham, I'll just say this: when I heard Madison Cunningham, I said, "Wow, she's the best songwriter I've heard since Dodie." Dodie is currently a YouTuber, but she kind of started on YouTube and has launched a whole music career off of it. And is really, really brilliant, a really sensitive songwriter who talks very openly about her struggles with mental health. And this song is kind of a message to people who are at a very, very low place. And when I've been at a very, very low place, I've held on to it, because it's a song that's basically saying, look, you're not going to hear what I have to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You're not going to believe what I'm saying, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And the line that always just killed me every time was, there will be a day when you can say you're okay and mean it. And as a person who has been able to say I'm okay and mean it since hearing that line and hoping against hope that would be true, I feel like Jesus reading from Isaiah saying this message is fulfilled in your hearing, because it's true. It's true. If you're at that point, if you're at that low place, there will be a day when you can say you're okay and mean it. And one of the ways you get there sometimes is by admitting that you're not okay, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. So check the song out. I'm gonna put it in the description. It's beautiful and it's true, because that's what we do on this podcast: the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So we've got another audience question that we're going to address today. A very deep and profound conversation can be drawn from this.
Oh dear.
So our listener writes in to ask, with Lower Decks and the original animated series showing Trek can be done animated, do you think another true animated series, less comedy and more true Trek, has a good shot? I know the Nickelodeon series may be animated, but I am thinking more mainline series with a more young adult theme, like Young Justice or Justice League Unlimited. Also, Netflix Jurassic Park cartoon rocks.
It does. It's pretty cool. My son's watched that. Camp Cretaceous. He's a big Jurassic World. It's a Jurassic World animated series, not a Jurassic Park cartoon. But I'm picking it nits.
There you go. Correcting one of our 3 listeners. Now we're down to 2.
I'm sure they can take it. So yeah. Okay, I kind of get where it's going, where it's like, is there room for another basically animated ship show? Like, is there room for another, because the animated series is basically, let's do the 4th season of the original series in animation.
Right.
That's the goal. I don't think it always meets that goal. The worst episodes are when it falls short of that, like the Jihad and the Slaver Weapon. But then,
oh my,
when it excels is like Yesteryear and well, even the Magics of Migos too. But anyway, yada yada. But yeah, I would like to see that. I was a little disappointed at the outset that Lower Decks was going to be a comedy series.
So yeah, comedic and goofy.
What did you think about that? Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I would love to see a Young Justice style sort of series where it's like, I kind of thought that's what Lower Decks was going to be, where they take the less well-known and kind of explore what they're going through. But just any sort of an animated Star Trek show, I think, has potential, because like with the original series animated show, you've got your special effects, your aliens and all that jazz can get a lot weirder.
Yes, that's true. And I like that about animation too, that you can do things in animation you can't do in you can do things in live action that years ago we would say you couldn't do in live action. So there's that, but there's a little bit more liberty in animation even still, because a lot of times it's not as expensive, to do an animated series that includes all those crazy elements, because you can use simpler animation styles than hyper realistic 3D CGI, that takes a fleet of animators. So there's advantages in that. And I have no idea what kind of series the Nickelodeon series is going to be. The very little plot or premise description I've heard feels like very much an offshoot and not really dealing with Starfleet directly at all. And it's very strange. But then again, Janeway is going to be in it. So who has any clue? Which, by the way, I meant to say your Voyager thing.
Oh, right.
Like, that's our Janeway news for the week.
Right.
We're just going to keep rolling with that. Send us Janeway news. We should have an email address, like Janeway news email address. But, Start a whole other podcast, Janeway News. But yeah, I mean, of course, I'd love to see it, and I think there's room for it. I don't think now's the time.
Yeah, I don't think there's room right now. I think it can be done. I just think we're getting close to saturation.
Yeah, I'm really concerned at this point about there being too many Star Trek series. I don't want the franchise to eat itself.
Right.
But everything that's being produced now is so good.
And you know, when you think about it, like the original, like the TNG and TOS DS9, their seasons were 24, 26, episodes long.
Yep.
The ones we're getting now are like 8 and 10, right? So
10 to 13.
Yeah. So in a way, it's still like, we get a season of Discovery and a season of Strange New Worlds, and that still would have been a 26 season.
Episodes.
Yeah.
You're right. So, well, I mean, the event that launched this podcast, the 23 weeks of Star Trek, right? So that we had new Star Trek coming out for 23 straight weeks, and how can I possibly ignore that? Right? But that would be we are living through what would have been a single season of television.
Right?
Not even a full single season.
And so
26 episodes.
There's potential there to, despite having more shows, to be less saturated, because it's if you've got different things that you're looking at, so you're not just doing Picard and crew for 26 episodes.
Yeah, it's smaller tastes of more things.
Right. And instead of a giant steak on your plate, you've got a smaller steak and a baked potato and a salad. You've got more to bite from, more to chew from.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and I feel like we might be rehashing a conversation that has been had at CBS. But yeah, I mean, I agree with that. At the same time, I'm like, as a fan, my brain can only handle that. I'm excited about season 4 of Discovery. I'm excited about season 2 of Picard. I will look for Lower Decks when it gets here, and I cannot wait for Strange New Worlds. That is all I can handle as a fan. I'm just like, when we did that story about there aren't going to be any Star Trek movies for a while, I was like, thank God, because honestly, I can't handle Star Trek movies right now. I've got enough to keep up with.
Yeah.
So,
like when we were back in high school, maybe even younger college days, bring it on.
Shoot, it was in high school when we were at the peak of Star Trek being on television that I dropped out of Star Trek because I couldn't keep up with it.
Oh,
because we had Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Next Generation. And I got behind on Next Generation.
We had the films, sure. We didn't have all 3 shows on at the same time.
I guess we didn't have all 3 shows at the same time. Maybe did we have it for one season? No. Because so we had Voyager, we had Deep Space Nine and Next Generation on at the same time.
Voyager picked up right after TNG.
Right, and you had to catch the episode when it aired, and I was having trouble doing that because I was getting later in high school and I didn't have much,
Yeah, this was back in the days before.
And I'd lose, and I'd miss an episode, and I'd be like, "Well, crumbs! I got to wait for it to come back around during the week so I can catch up." And it was hard. Yeah. We had such struggles when we were kids.
I know, right?
But still, like, I felt oversaturated then a little bit. Like there was too much going on, and I couldn't keep up with it, and so I dropped out of Star Trek for a while, which led to the origin of the Gospel According to Star Trek. So maybe it wasn't a bad thing. But I to answer the question, yes, it would be cool to see a serious Star Trek series with today's level of storytelling, with today's animation. But of course, I would want it to be animated for a purpose. Now, I want it to be a series that needs to be animated, that somehow in its nature, it thrives in animation. And I don't know how or what that would look like. And maybe Prodigy will answer that question for us.
An animated series could give us, I think it would be much better suited to giving us a truer anthology where, like, you could do each episode a completely different ship and crew, right? Just bring in different voice actors, different writers, even different artists to give you a very specific feel to the episode. And you could do a lot of outside the box stylistic stuff that you couldn't do in a live action series that needed to be stylistically consistent.
Well, we've touched on this a little bit in Short Treks.
That's true.
Where we've had certain episodes, and we even had one animated episode of Short Treks, which was completely outside what is normally in Star Trek. It was so different. And then that one episode that takes place, far, far in the future, also completely outside what we normally do in Star Trek. And that's fun and that's exciting. And so, that could be a way to do it too. I think that's different than what the person is asking about.
No,
but
it
is another possible angle for sure. Yeah. So I don't know, does that answer the question? I think it does.
I think so.
Yeah. So thanks for the question, and please, folks, keep them coming. We love getting questions. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
So yeah. All right. Well, Tim, I ask the same question every week, and these days we're getting the same answer, but please tell the audience at home what we are doing next week.
Well, next week, Kevin, we are going to be covering the 5th episode of Discovery, and we're going to see what else comes up.
You're kidding me.
No.
Sorry, I was feigning surprise.
Oh.
It was supposed to be a joke.
Was that what that was?
Yeah, sorry.
All right, see, again with the soundboard. I could play the little sad trombone noise or the failed joke noise.
You don't have to. It plays in my head. So anyway, back to the script we don't have, because that does sound tantalizing. I'm excited. It's great every week that I don't know what next week's episode's going to be.
Keeps it fresh.
An adventure. Yeah, join us on the adventure. So yeah, I hope you'll all be there with us, because we love having you along. But in the meantime, please like, share, comment, rate, and subscribe. And on YouTube, be sure to hit the bell for notifications and send us your questions, as I just said. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter or Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com, because we would, as always, love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
Maritime vessel, soft upon the sea, gaily, life is but a dream.
Thank you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm waiting to see if you figure it out.
What's row, 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 boat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also connects to Forget Me Not.
It does?
Uh-huh.
How?
It's a haiku.
Oh, did you write that?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Please share it with us again. Please go ahead.
Maritime vessel, soft upon the sea, gaily, life is but a dream.
Very good. I like that. That's really good. Fantastic. You never know.
I don't know how they do it off the cuff.
Oh yeah.
In the episode.
And yeah, I love the moment.
I wanted to quote Tilly. We get it. We all know you're smart.
Everyone's smart here, right?
But that just reminded me of the thing that I liked the most about Wilson Cruz, where he's came to the realization that Colbert does that because he's trying to let everyone know it's okay to make mistakes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That really hit home with me. I like that. It's important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it is okay to make mistakes. We have to make mistakes, or we'll never progress or learn.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. Very good. Okay, well, that's going to wrap it up then for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. We thank you so much for being here, and until next time,
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin Sinise, and as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.